Beyond Audio, the legal side of video and multimedia podcasting, all on this episode of Legit Podcast Pro. Hello, podcasters and digital creators. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and you are tuned into Legit Podcast Pro, your trusted guide in the ever-evolving world of podcasting. Today, we're going to look at the emerging trend of integrating video and multimedia in your podcasts. As we witness a paradigm shift in podcasting with more and more creators blending their audio with these visual elements, it's imperative to stay informed about the legal landscape that accompanies these changes. Whether you're experimenting with video interviews, incorporating animations, or infusing multimedia elements into your show, understanding the legal nuances is key to not only enhancing your podcast, but also safeguarding it. So we're going to take a look into the legalities, from copyright complexities to privacy questions and everything in between. So whether you are a seasoned podcaster or just breaking into the scene, Legit Podcast Pro is here to arm you with the knowledge and confidence to venture into the world of video podcasting legally and successfully. First off, let's start with copyright laws and licensing. This is the bedrock of legal considerations when you're making media of any kind. So let's talk about what copyright actually is. In simple terms, copyright is a legal right that grants the creator of an original work exclusive rights to its use and distribution, usually for a limited time, with the intent of enabling the creator to receive compensation for their intellectual property. Now, when it comes to video and multimedia, this can cover a broad spectrum, from video clips and music to photographs and spoken word and graphic art. And it's important to note that it's not just the stuff that you are being deliberate about putting in the foreground, but anything at all that finds its way into your frame. Even that poster or painting on the back wall of your studio, it all needs to be properly cleared. So what this means for you as a podcaster is that if you want to use anything that belongs to somebody else, somebody created by something else, video, music, images, whatever, in your podcast, you've got to have the right permissions. And that could be in the form of licenses, but those can vary. Some are very straightforward, like stock footage or royalty-free music licenses, and others, especially for popular songs or well-known video clips, might require negotiating specific terms. And this is where it gets tricky, because even when you have a license, there could be limitations. A license might, for example, allow you to use a piece of music in a podcast, but not in a video format. That's why it's crucial that you read and understand the terms of any license you acquire. Make sure the written documents are clear about granting you all the rights that you might need. So now let's touch on how to go about sourcing your content. There are plenty of resources for royalty-free or Creative Commons licensed media out there. And then there are websites like Epidemic Sound and Pond5 and those kind of things. These are great starting points. But remember, free doesn't always mean free for any use. Always check the license details. And then there's the inevitable question, what about fair use? Well, this is a common question. Fair use can be a defense to copyright infringement, particularly for purposes like criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship. But fair use is complex. It's often misunderstood. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, and relying on it without proper understanding and analysis from a lawyer can really land you in hot water. So the key takeaway I want you to have is respect the intellectual property of others, just as you would want your own intellectual property respected. Do your due diligence in sourcing and licensing the content for your video podcasts. It's not just the ethical thing to do, but it's critical for staying on the right side of the law as well. Now, the next topic that's crucial for anyone stepping into video is privacy and publicity rights. This is about protecting not just your content, but also respecting the rights of other people who are featured in your videos. Starting with privacy, when you are recording video, especially if it's outside of a controlled environment like a studio, you need to be mindful of privacy laws. These laws vary significantly depending on where you're doing the recording. Generally, when someone's in a public space, there's a lesser expectation of privacy, but that doesn't give you carte blanche. If you're focusing on individuals or recording in a place where people do have some reasonable expectation that what's going on is private, well, then you have to be cautious. And this brings us to the concept of release forms. A podcast release form, a video release form, is essentially a contract where the person you're recording consents to being recorded and to you using that footage in your podcast. This is particularly important if you are doing street interviews, recording in private places, or featuring guests on your show. Having a signed release can save you from a lot of legal headaches down the road. You can get a copy of my free podcast release form by going to podcastrelease.com. And yes, it does handle things like video as well, really well. Okay, next we're going to talk about the right of publicity. This refers to an individual's right to control and make money from the commercial use of their name, image, and likeness. If your video podcast is monetized or associated with a business, then you need to be very careful about this kind of thing. Even if someone agrees to be filmed and recorded, using their image for commercial purposes could be a whole different ballgame. And what about recording in public or at an event? Well, generally, if someone is in a public place, they have a lower expectation of privacy. But there's a lot of nuance here. Is a privately owned stadium a public place? What about an office at the park, for example, or something like that? So just because you can legally record someone in a public place doesn't mean that you can use that kind of footage for everything that you might want to, especially if it's a commercial purpose. And also, there's a quick note about children. Always exercise extra caution when you have children in your video or on your recordings. The rules are often a lot stricter when it comes to minors, so always get consent from parent or guardian if that's at all possible. So the bottom line for this little segment, always think about privacy and the right of publicity when you're incorporating video in your podcast. When in doubt, get consent, use a release form, and be respectful of individuals' rights. Now let's dive into how trademarks can impact your video content. First, what is a trademark? Well, in simple terms, a trademark is a recognizable sign, design, or expression which identifies products or services of a particular source. Now, why does this matter for video podcasters? Well, imagine that you're filming a segment and there's a big recognizable logo or product in the background or even in your hand. Well, you could be stepping into trademark territory. So trademarks are protected by law, and unauthorized use of trademarks can lead to infringement claims. This is particularly the case if your use suggests some kind of sponsorship or affiliation or endorsement by the trademark owner or by you of the trademark owner. So what can you do? Be mindful of what's in your frame. If you're filming in a location with visible logos and branded products, well, consider how they're being presented. It's not just about avoiding legal issues, but maintaining your integrity and professionalism in your content as well. Now, we talk about commercial use. What this generally means is that, look, if your podcast is monetized or associated with your business, the way you use trademarks becomes even more critical. Using a trademark logo or product in a way that viewers could interpret as an endorsement or affiliation with your brand could land you and the other brand in hot water. Always err on the side of caution. Now, a common question I get is about showing products or brands incidentally, like I just did. General rule of thumb, if it's incidental and not misleading about any endorsement or affiliation, then you're likely to be in the clear. But remember, likely doesn't mean definitely. Every situation is unique, and when in doubt, it's a good idea to seek legal advice. Now, another area that relates to both trademarks and copyrights is parody and criticism. This is an area where these uses might be permissible, but there's a lot of nuance and it's very fact-specific. Using a trademark in parody or criticism isn't automatically a shield from an infringement claim, so check in with a lawyer and tread carefully. Be mindful of how you use and display brands in your content. Next up, I want to talk about platform-specific rules and guidelines. As video podcasters, it's not just about creating great content. It's also about knowing where and how you can share it. Each video hosting platform, whether it's YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, or some other, has its own set of rules and guidelines. And these can range from restrictions on the type of content that's allowed, to how you can monetize your videos, to even how you're allowed to interact with your audience. Let's take YouTube, for example. They have strict guidelines about copyrighted material, explicit content. Even the use of certain keywords can affect your monetization. Violating their rules can result in your content being demonetized or removed from the platform altogether. And remember, just because your content is legal doesn't mean that it meets a particular platform's community standards. On platforms like Facebook or Instagram, you also have to be aware of their terms. regarding things like data usage and how you interact with your viewers. It's not just about the content, it's about the entire ecosystem of your podcast, your show's presence on these platforms. Now, one key piece of advice, always read and stay updated with the terms of service and community guidelines of the platforms you use. I know. Nobody reads those things, but you're supposed to. They're there for you to understand, and it makes sense. Go through them sometime. They can and do change, sometimes without much notice, and not being aware of what the rule is no defense if you run afoul of these rules. Too often we've seen people deplatformed because of violating rules they didn't know existed. So know the rules of the platforms you're using. They are just as important as the legal considerations we've discussed earlier. It's about being a responsible and informed creator. So as we wrap up today's episode of Legit Podcast Pro, I just want to take a moment to reflect on what we've covered. We've journeyed through the complex yet fascinating world of legal considerations in video and multimedia podcasting. From understanding copyright laws and licensing to navigating privacy and publicity rights, trademark considerations, and the intricate rules of the various hosting platforms. Clearly, stepping into the world of video podcasting requires not just creativity, but also a heightened level of awareness of these kinds of issues. Now remember, the goal isn't just to avoid legal pitfalls. It's about creating content responsibly and ethically and respecting the law and the rights of others. As podcasters, our power lies in our voices, our message, and our content. Using that power responsibly is what sets apart truly professional, successful podcasters. So I hope today's episode has provided you with valuable insights and a clearer understanding of the legal side of video and multimedia podcasting. As always, I am here to help guide you through the legal maze of the podcasting world. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and you can reach out to me with questions or visit thepodcastlawyer.com for more resources. And don't forget to join me in my free workshop, Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit, where we dive deeper into the essentials of podcasting law. Visit event.podcastlaw.net to sign up. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for tuning in to Legit Podcast Pro. I'm the podcast lawyer, Gordon Firemark, reminding you, stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore another exciting aspect of podcasting and the law. Until then, keep creating, keep innovating, stay legit, and have a great day.